Greetings, dear audience. This is Alucard. Here's the beginning of my series for recommended retro games. We're in a great age of games being available on PC and console. Not just the availability of the new games, but the older video games and PC games as well. I decided to begin this series in which I recommend these older video games as an invitation to share with you a way of looking back at how various elements of video games were pioneered in the past with these retro games which I will recommend in these various episodes. The games which I will be recommending will also include where and how the games can be purchased, in addition to mentioning their significance contributed to the world of gaming. Without much further ado, let's begin. The 1990s is a time that some people today are nostalgic for. The 90s was also a time in which a number of today's popular game franchises got their start. Today we will be talking about some recommended retro PC and console games from the 1990s, which I would recommend revisiting. The 1990s was the time of Sega Genesis, Super Nintendo, and a number of other consoles which are not as well remembered now, such as the 3DO actually having a game console of its own, which actually happened from 1993 until 1997. The latter half of the 1990s was also a transition to early 3D games in which the character you played as in the game can navigate the world or platform levels vertically and horizontally in the same game, and infamous for the time of Sega Saturn, Sony PlayStation, and Nintendo 64. So the first one I'm going to represent here is called Metal Gear Solid. The Metal Gear franchise, named for the titular battle mech in the games known as Metal Gear, did not begin with Metal Gear Solid. In fact, there had been 3 Metal Gear games prior to Metal Gear Solid's release on the Sony PlayStation console in 1998, with Metal Gear, Snake's Revenge, and Metal Gear 2 developed by Konami. Snake's Revenge not being considered part of the continuity of the Metal Gear games. What Metal Gear did feature was audio dialogue and in-game video cutscene cinematics, providing world building and exposition into the world of Metal Gear. The cutscenes do take a considerable amount of gameplay time compared to other games like Half-Life or Deus Ex, where you heard dialogue on the fly rather than video cutscenes along with walls of text on screen with the earlier Metal Gear games. The stealth mechanics were also more advanced through the increased processing power of the PlayStation compared to previous games on the Famicom or NES. The game also carries over older mechanics from previous Metal Gear games such as weapons and inventory to deliver a game experience closer to a cinematic spy thriller experience in game form. The game also made David Hayter the iconic voice of the series protagonist, Solid Snake. Also true is that prior to David Hayter, they'd asked Kurt Russell, the actor from Escape from LA and Escape from New York, and he turned it down. Not feeling that video games were worth him lending his role, feeling that the role would be too derivative of the film by John Carpenter, for which he had starred in, and he wanted to be part of some other new franchise instead. David Hayter would go on to become famous from his voiceovers as Solid Snake in the game, become a legend in the world of gaming. The game was well received, selling over 7 million copies worldwide and receiving multiple releases. The game did pioneer having video cutscenes made using the game's own gameplay engine, along with the aforementioned audio voiceover performances in the game. The game helped in popularizing stealth and espionage genre of games in which the player relies on being sneaky in the game due to the enemy easily overwhelming the player if the player is spotted and detected. The game received a special edition known as Integral, released on Windows and PlayStation in 1999. The game also received a remake on the Nintendo GameCube in 2004 known as the Twin Snakes. Metal Gear Solid is available on various platforms including Nintendo Switch, Sony PlayStation, Sony PS4, Sony PS5, Windows, Xbox Series X/X, as well as part of Volume 1 of the Metal Gear Master Collection. The PC version of the Master Collection can be purchased on PC on GOG or GOG.com or Steam. Now, what was my experience with Metal Gear Solid? I was a late bloomer. I was more interested in another spy game series known as Splinter Cell before I ever had any interest in Metal Gear. I'd seen the character of Solid Snake in the Super Smash Bros. Game, but wasn't interested then. I got somewhat interested and curious about Metal Gear Solid because I looked for games to play on the PlayStation 2, even that involved PS1 games using backwards compatibility, and the game among those recommended to me was the Metal Gear Solid games. There were Metal Gear Solid games at the time after the original Metal Gear Solid, but I had a preoccupation with playing games in order, and I wasn't sure how to find the original Metal Gear for Famicom and NES. So I decided, hey, I'll get Metal Gear Solid on Amazon and put it into my PS2 and use the backwards compatibility to play the PS1 game. When I began to play the game, I was already familiar with some elements contained in the game from playing the Splinter Cell series, including alarms, cameras, and so on. And while enjoying the inventory options and odd tricks in the game, such as hiding under the cardboard box, it also became quite a bit different from Splinter Cell. It's how the game was a big world rather than separate maps from Splinter Cell in the top-down view as opposed to the view from over the shoulder in the Splinter Cell games. A number of the boss battles got interesting, such as the Ninja or Grey Fox, in which he will slaughter you unless you put away your weapons and fight him unarmed. I did enjoy the remake of Metal Gear Solid known as Twin Snakes for the GameCube, but it is simply not the same as the original PlayStation Classic, with a more lighthearted tone and new games and mechanics, which, while optional to play by these main game mechanics, they don't quite carry over into the remake, and if you do succumb to the temptation of these new game mechanics, it makes the game much easier than the original PlayStation game. The tone of Metal Gear Solid is very much a game that held a legacy in terms of spy games or stealth action games, and at the time of its release, it created a lot of interest. I feel that, it was essentially, the godfather of the Splinter Cell game I was interested in beforehand, and before I got around to playing actual Metal Gear Solid. So the next one I'm going to mention is, no, it's not Diablo. I know there's plenty of people interested in playing it now in recent years. It was a milestone. Diablo was a game that was part of the pioneering of multiplayer online gaming. So, Diablo was how they got Battle.net launched over at Blizzard, which provided a great way to get together for multiplayer games. And Diablo had a random map generator, which is great. But I'm not going into Diablo, and I'll have a later video explaining how it's not actually a role-playing game, and how a lot of this action RPG is a cop-out of getting a true RPG. But that's for later. But my RPG that I'm going to recommend today is Baldur's Gate. There's recently the Baldur's Gate 3 that has come out, thanks to people sponsoring the making of a Baldur's Gate 3. But I'm going to talk about the first one. And Baldur's Gate was released in late 1998 for Windows and later for macOS and Linux. The Baldur's Gate and its two sequels are available on Steam and GOG or GOG.com. A game adaptation of Dungeons & Dragons, Baldur's Gate was developed by BioWare and initially released on December 21st, 1998. It featured a top-down isometric view in the game, and as a role-playing game featured numerous side quests and main story quests, all along with your decisions having effects on your fellow party members or even various communities and the overall world of the game at large. The sequels to Baldur's Gate allowed you to carry over your character you played as in the first Baldur's Gate by opening up your character file from Baldur's Gate 2. My experience with Baldur's Gate has been interesting. I played through the original Baldur's Gate years back, and while I haven't played the actual Dungeons & Dragons game with pen, paper, and figures, I enjoy playing the original Baldur's Gate with the D&D gameplay rules, being more of a player of Warhammer 40k. But I enjoy Baldur's Gate for the combination of decision-making, character strategies, and the impact of the decisions in the game on everything from my companions to talents becoming liberated to open business because I took care of the monster problems, along with plot twists and my dialogue inspiring various characters and communities and their actions and their overall status. Clear out monsters, and now a community becomes open, the market opens up. Go and encourage someone to pursue their dreams and they can get that occupation. That is the part that I enjoyed the most about Baldur's Gate and the decision making, the key element of a role-playing game, making decisions, and the consequences. Which leads me to the next role-playing game, and the third and final one I'm going to recommend in this episode. This is my recommendation right here. So there is Fallout. Continuing the trends of role-playing games, which I've recommended with Baldur's Gate, there is another monumental role-playing game for the late 1990s, which I would also recommend, known as Fallout. The original Fallout was published by Interplay in 1997 as a spiritual successor to another post-nuclear role-playing game known as Wasteland. Due to an issue of Electronic Arts or EA Games holding the publishing rights to the franchise, a spiritual successor known as Fallout was made instead of another Wasteland game. After years of obscurity, there would eventually be sequels to Wasteland made through the support of crowdfunding, but during that long period of no new Wasteland games, Fallout was made instead with similar themes of a new society emerging in the aftermath of a global nuclear apocalypse. Fallout was produced by Tim Kaine, with Chris Jones working with Kaine as programmer, Leonard Boyarsky, Jason Anderson, Gary Plattner providing the game's artwork, and Mark Morgan composing the game's musical score. The name Fallout carries a dual meaning. One is the consequences of the player's choices in the game, a major element that makes Fallout a role-playing game. And the other is the reference to the radioactive debris following nuclear bombs exploding. The Fallout being a reference to consequences is a major part of the game because at the end of the classic Fallout games and New Vegas, there is a slideshow showing the various consequences of the player's actions on the world. The game shows dialogue with NPCs using videos produced using claymation, which both gives an uncanny valley effect to the characters, along with helping with the dark or even humorous tones of the game. The original games are available for modern PCs on Steam or GOG, or GOG.com. The games are part of a revival in the interest in role-playing games. The games take heavy inspiration from Mad Max, A Boy and His Dog, Forbidden Planet, Planet of the Apes, and more. The games follow the definition of a role-playing game quite well, as I mentioned in earlier games, with player choices affecting the status of the NPCs up to the status of the world in which the game occurs. The variations on how the games can end based on the various choices of the player lend to the game's replayability. Overall, if you want to give a try to a dark, post-apocalyptic milestone in the RPG genre, Fallout is a place to start, and I recommend it as well. The original Fallout games are available on GOG and Steam for versions just play on modern PCs. These are three of my retro game recommendations. I'm looking forward to more episodes in my recommended video game series. You can get requests or get engaged to my channel with commenting or joining my Discord server with the links in the description. If you really enjoyed this series and like the video, and if you're looking forward to being updated on a continuation of this series, subscribe to the channel and click the bell for notifications on upcoming new content. Until we meet again, farewell.